Oh, good morning, beautiful people. Welcome back to LoveBabz LoveTalk, the second hour. And as promised, I'm having a conversation with some brothers who are doing their very best to raise awareness around wrongful convictions, particularly around the Maleek Jones, Maleek Jones case. Hey, Dr. Don McCauley. Hey, James Jeter. How y'all doing? Unmute yourselves. Hey, Maleek. How are you?
Hi, Babz. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are y'all?
I'm doing well today.
All right, so we're here to talk about wrongful convictions. Is that what that's how I'm framing this? Because this is quite troubling to me. So I want to make sure I frame it out right in the ways that make sense for y'all this morning.
I think Maleek's trying to get on with the audio.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think today wrongful conviction, but also talk about Maleek get the opportunity to talk about his story and put it out so that the rest of the world can understand what was happening, what happened then, and what's the transition now, what more can be done.
Okay. All right. So take us back. Give us a brief synopsis of what has happened. Just like a 2-second. What are we up against?
James?
Maleek, you want to take it? I mean, you know better than anybody.
I think Maleek has to reconnect his audio.
Yeah, has to reconnect his audio. So anyway, someone Mr. Jones. Okay, go ahead, James. Somebody.
Trying to get him to get his volume right. All right, he's connecting the audio right now.
Okay. So he was convicted of a crime that he did not commit 31 years ago. The courts set him free. The federal court set him free. The state courts are, from what I understand, is looking to appeal this latest turn of events.
The state court has stated their intent to appeal, but they haven't issued on what grounds that they're going to yet.
Okay. All right. And so what we want to know is how the community could best support Maleek. And this is not, and unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon. Like they're out of the 30 some odd cases in Connecticut that have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated, half of those come from New Haven.
Since Maleek's case was overturned, we tipped the scale. We're no longer half. We're the majority.
So we're the majority now.
We're the majority. Yeah.
So in your quest to raise awareness around wrongful convictions, does that also include more police oversight on how cases are handled and how cases are and evidence is collected and how people are charged with crimes and what happens when due diligence isn't done fully?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the base, the only way for prevention, but it can't be a paper tiger. Like in the past, any forms of police oversight, they haven't had any power to do anything of any real substance to enforce any corrections or penalties. Even like right now with the state's integrity review commission, they haven't exonerated anybody with the power to exonerate from the state's office. They haven't done it. They have cases on their desk right now that they won't touch. And then I hope Maleek can jump on. Trying to.
Okay. So in the meantime, we do have to keep talking because it's.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the state hasn't. The state has. I want to say more than doubled down. I don't think there's you have to like exponentially they've downed on their desire to uphold injustices that come out of a time period that we have to be ready to re-examine. Like we have to be ready as a community to re-examine exactly what transpired in our neighborhoods in the late 80s and throughout the 90s, and like really come to a place of reckoning, reconciliation, and recompense. Like those three things have to happen in our community, about what transpired with our youth during a generation where all the jobs left, the warehouses, the factory jobs left, the textile companies left, and our neighborhoods were flooded with drugs. Like we don't talk about how that vacuum and then this deregulation of how stuff was entering our communities impacted our communities and our youth. And how we can own the harm and the trauma and the harm that was done. How all of it the complexity of it can be discussed, owned, and held. And we can hold, and in the same way that, I myself and others have been held accountable, also holding the authorities accountable for the way that they just ran roughshod through our communities, the way that they held our communities hostage literally at gunpoint, and with complete impunity. Like they just did what they wanted. The law keepers were the biggest breakers of it.
I'll add to that. I think one of the conversations for me, like being a part of the police accountability bill, but also the section around citizen review boards, that the bill was written in a way where it gave autonomy to different communities to decide and vote on if they wanted civilian review boards. I know that one of the challenges in this one would be one, putting that together, getting that voted on, and getting that civilian review board. But to James' point about how do we retroactively go back? And so is evidence still available to like figure out how do we have this kind of redemption in terms of what our relationships could be with community policings, and also like, is the police department open to those possibilities? And I get the reality is like they should be open to those possibilities in terms of just establishing those effective relationships, because from my perspective, a lot of it's catastrophic. A lot of us were young at those times, 5 and 6, and recognizing the changes in our communities, walking down the street, the different things that we saw go up street. And I don't think the city is any different. It just looks different. So folks that grew up and saw friends go away and come home, and saw the not just the rise in violence, the rise in policing, and just in certain particular areas, and what those relationships turned into. So I reflect on that and to say like a civilian review board is possible. The question is, does it have teeth? And that's always the question of how do we move that forward? Are they going to be able to hold folks accountable? Are these lawyers? Are these doctors? Who's on different sides? And so I think that trying to get back what the people need instead of thinking about what the politics want, who doesn't want to be accountable for the past and just move forward, I think that's problematic, and that's why we're here today.
Okay. Mr. Jones, can you hear us? Can you unmute your phone? And you all that are on phones, you could put your phone on landscape and you could fill out the square. Just FYI. You just turn it to the side. Just turn it.
It's unmuted.
You have to unmute yourself.
How do I do this?
Perfect. There you go.
You're
there
good.
You go.
We hear you.
All right. I'm on.
Yes,
I don't
know
how to do the landscape. I don't know how to do all this stuff, man.
The landscape is just take physically. You know how you have your phone like this? Just turn it like that.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. How everybody doing?
I'm good. How are you? How are you doing? What are you?
I'm doing okay, man. It's really good to be on this side right now. So I don't have no complaints right now.
So what are your thoughts on the possibility of the state sort of appealing your freedom?
And me personally, I feel like it's offensive. You know what I mean? I've been in prison 30-something years, something I didn't do. And, the state and the police withheld evidence in that regard. The judge overturned my conviction, and yet they're appealing it. Like, what are they appealing? she rendered her decision. You know, I carefully you know, went through it, and I don't actually see what it is that they're appealing. Like, you know, it was really an indictment, you know, on the things that they that they failed to do, or evidence that they suppressed. So I don't get why are they still, what are they arguing at this point?
Mm. So when you think about this, Maleek, do you think about what was the catalyst for doing this to you? Like, what was the driving catalyst for this? I am quite troubled by this rush to make you the person that did this crime, when they at some point they knew that you didn't do this, but yet they continue to follow this narrative to the end.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that the prosecutor in this case, you know, he was involved in, you know, some other cases that I had. So I don't know. He had a thing with that. But, you know, it was just, I guess, you know, the neighborhood that I was in at that time, you know, it was a lot of stuff going on. And, you know, they just figured, you know, they wanted to come after me. You know what I mean? And you know, I don't get it, especially if they had evidence that other people had committed the crime. Why would they, you know, just go to fabricate the case on me? Like, so yeah, it was kind of crazy, you know, when you think about it.
Mm. So when y'all think about this particular case and all the other cases of wrongful convicted folks, where do we begin with? And I know you talked about we need to go back and look at some of these cases that was happening in the 80s and all of that, and I agree with you. But where do we begin there, and how involved can we get the community? Because, you know, Dr. McCauley, the Civilian Review Board became a thing, but it's very hard to get people to serve on the Civilian Review Board. It is very time consuming, and it is not often like you see on TV where it's exciting work and it's like eureka, and it's tedious and time consuming commitment.
To answer that, I think the reason it becomes tedious and time consuming is that when you get the Civilian Review Board, it has to go through a million different hoops to try to get evidence that to some degree is hidden. It's not easily available. It's not openly discussed. So maybe a Civilian Review Board looks at it in a way, well, I may have a better connection with the community, but it's not there to do a job or create a relationship the police don't have. The reality is sometimes they're there to hold the police accountable for particular things that have happened within the community, and to see is if their specific chain of command has been followed. And so the reality of Civilian Board, that makes it difficult. I think a part of this is really about how the power of policing becomes something that's like a fearful or a prophecy, saying that I'm making certain mandates and using power in a very erroneous way to set a precedent to keep people fearful and have this divisive relationship. And so the reality is, when you say a rush for judgment, like, who's involved? Like, reality, when they make mistakes, then they know that has set a precedent for 20 or 30 other cases that have been convicted. So their track record goes under file, and that becomes that problem. It's like someone is protecting their legacy of career while also using innocent people to make their case. And I think that's the unfortunate reality.
And so how do we talk about this in community? Maleek, what would you like to see happen? James Jeter, what would you like to see happen in community? And how do we prevent another Maleek from happening? And I know there's people sitting in prison right now who are waiting for their turn to be exonerated. Like, I know that, you know that, we know that. How do we create a system where this does not continue to happen?
Go ahead, James. You can take it first.
All right. I think I think that I could say something, but then I'm kind of struggling with the reality of what is, right. So like what Don just laid out. So when you look at New Haven, for example, Chokio, the detective in Maleek's case, he suppressed evidence, and he's then made the state's chief investigator, right? So he's promoted, right? Rauchi, the detective in Scott Lewis's case, he had 14 internal affair investigations that he was cleared on all 14 of them, and then he was indicted by the feds as a drug kingpin. Right. So these are the internal issues that when Don talks about how a review board is ultimately turned into a paper tiger because you can't get his files. They're not turning over. How do you? There's no cooperation from that wall, that blue wall, to bring down their own, right? Because it's a system. So when corruption becomes institutionalized, it is the system. And so now you're talking about judges who allow this to happen in court, not just the prosecutors, but the judges who know law, who know that what was happening was illegal, allowed it to happen, ruled on it, and then prosecutors who become judges, and from that, and they have a legacy now, and they're rooted in corruption. This is a system. So we're talking about pulling a string that pulls at the entire system. Community has to be willing to support that. It can't, you know what I mean? Like, a community has to be willing to demand and support that, or else it doesn't get done. It can't be a handful of people to really do that big of a lift. We have to do the lift. Like, it has to be all of us.
Maleek?
Yeah, just to really piggyback on what he was saying, I mean, we see that, you know, the police or, you know, the state trying to investigate themselves, that really don't get us anywhere. You know what I mean? We've been having this problem for the longest, you know what I mean? And it seems like nothing has changed. But I also agree that, you know, the community, you know, we have to stop becoming, you know, comfortable, you know, with, or just becoming immune to stuff like this when it happens. Like, you know, like we're normalizing this, and, you know, normalizing this stuff. People's lives are being affected by this. And yeah, we need to have, like, you know, our public officials, man, we need some type of oversight. You know what I mean? That's really going to do something to make a difference, because, you know, this thing has been going on. It's been perpetual. You know what I mean? Especially when you look at New Haven in general. Like, when you look at all of the you know, the cases that have been exonerated, you know, more than 50% of them are out of New Haven. That has to tell you something out of the entire state. You know what I mean? So that's an issue that you know, we have to reckon with. You know, and hopefully, you know, moving forward, something can be done to really address this. You know what I mean?
And so do you have conversation with the legislative leadership, like the folks that sort of, you know, put money in cities and towns and municipalities? Do you have those conversations with legislative leadership about this is problematic and this has to be looked into? I mean, do you start there? Where do we start with trying to make some inroads in this? I mean, you telling your story and being very present is goes a long way with people sort of seeing you and knowing your story. You know, but what else can be done from all the places where we can attack this issue?
Well, you hit on it. I mean, like, I don't have conversations with legislators. You know, I would like to, but I know that there are brothers out there like James and, you know, brother Racy, and so now a lot of other brothers out there that's doing a lot of, you know, positive work out there that, you know, they've been to the Capitol, you know what I mean? And they've, you know, been around in those circles to try to see if, you know, they can move the needle somehow. So hopefully they need support, you know what I mean? And hopefully the community and other people and other organizations can, you know, get behind them, you know, in that effort.
So Don?
I'd say the same thing. I mean, the reality is that for us going into a political season now, you think about how politicians prioritize their platforms, and recognizing that politics should, at its least, recognize that this is happening in particular communities, and using politics to reaffirm humanity. You see, those that are doing humanity work are not the politicians; they're the advocates that are not at the state. There are these institutions that are the third arm of government in the state, UConn or Yale, in terms of having these particular initiatives, but actually a politician standing on these realities and saying, how do we remend the harm that we've done and not just use it as isolated situations where it's like, oh, let's close a prison. Let's get rid of a particular protocol in a prison. And so like, let's think about it at a more macro level. What's happening with all our prison systems? What's happening? How we're policing it? Because it happens across different places. But because we have particular small municipalities and small political spaces, that what becomes a priority for New Haven may not be a priority for Guilford. But the reality is that we are collectively together. And so when we want individuals to be advocates for their issues, when our issues come, they seem to go on deaf ears.
Mm-hmm. So James Jeter, is there an organizing body? Are you organizing a body of folks?
Yeah, the Full Citizens Coalition, we move on the theory and ideology of community equity. But because I say equity because equity starts with power, right? And so, and people, people have a definition of power that is pretty perverse. So when you say power, all they think about is their own perverse definition. When you think of institutions, so they, it causes them to cringe. They don't want to give you power, but ultimately, power for us is the ability to create our own equity. And when you talk about the political, the political moves, it's created its own algorithm that is absent of us. So it doesn't move according to its designed purpose, right? This is a country that was started, the beginning of the Constitution is we the people, right? And so our country's saying for hundreds of years was "E pluribus unum," for many one, right? So these are the things that this country will be rooted in, which means that government comes from the people. That's not the case anymore. We push voting rights. For citizen coalitions, we harping on voting rights, not from the point of going out to support any candidate, but understanding how a community has the ability to build equity. Like right now in the political season, and especially in the legislative season, it's a short session. Short sessions are extremely conservative because on the heels of short session is every legislator's reelection, and so they play everything tight to the vest. They play tight to the vest because they don't want any anomaly to harm their ability to stay in office. And so you won't get legislation to help us pass in the short session. It won't happen unless you can prove to them that come November they won't have a job anymore. And so the theories of how these people actually work for us is lost in our communities. And so that's why I'm saying community has to get behind this, is because our communities have completely checked out on this process. Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, less than 20% of the voting population determines who your mayor, council, alderman, and board of ed is. And those numbers shrink around each one. And if you even want to get more particular, your mayor's decided in those three cities in the primary. So you're talking about 5 to 7% of your voting population, right? Determines who's going to run your city. So these are things that we've checked out of, and then we believe it doesn't work, but it's working for somebody. It's working for very small populations of community. It's working for suburban fear relief. Like the way that we're policed eases the fear of the suburbs. The way that we're incarcerated makes them feel safe about laying down at night, right? Because they believe in the arm of the state. The police are an arm of the state. They are the part that you surrender your violence to, right? And so they're comfortable with that. They're comfortable with a lot that we can't be comfortable with. We're complacent in, but we're not comfortable with it. No one's comfortable with how our communities are ran, the lack of employment, the lack of housing, all the things that make going outside and taking penitentiary chances look attractive, right? We're not comfortable with any of it, but we're complacent in it. But the day we stop being complacent and we understand that, these Connecticut cities are chocolate. They chocolate and brown. Like these is our cities, and we can run them and we can change the political landscape. Then we can change police departments. We can make them actually work in a way that is productive for our communities and not harmful. But that's a complete mind transformation that I don't think we're in a generation that has the patience for it, because it didn't happen overnight. It took, 50 years to bring us to a certain place. I don't think it takes 50 to get us out of it. I think it takes a few. It takes a few years for it to really come to the realization to see the fruit of what this can look like. And I guess, not I guess, the work is how do we constantly build and strategize to bring the new thought process to community, because it takes a complete transformation of the mind in our communities. It's not about these politicians. It's because they're elected, which means that they can be unelected. They're all for registration drives. They're not necessarily for new voters, because they can't predict what they're going to do, right? And so, so we have more power than we realize in making sure that there are no more Maleek Jones cases. It's so rooted in community and not in their hands, and we have to come back to that reality that we can protest, or we can unelect, or we can do both.
Mm-hmm. So
right?
Maleek Jones, go ahead. I'm sorry, James.
No. I've talked more than enough. Please.
No, this is radio. Everybody got to talk. So Maleek, when you hear that, after spending 31 years and you're out now, how connected do you stay to this struggle, to this fight, to this awareness raising? No one would fault you if you said, you know what, I like to go quietly and live my life and do what I want to do because I've paid enough. Where are you in that space?
Yeah, it would be easy to do that, but so much of my life has been, surrounded by, what's been going on, that I don't know if I could just walk away like that. You know what I mean? Like my life has been impacted by this, and I had brothers like James and other brothers who actually was out there on the ground, fighting for me too. Fighting with me. Like they didn't fight for me, they fought with me. And I think that I owe it, not just to myself, but to them, to see this through, because I don't want to see nobody go through what I went through. They say that nobody knows the burden like he who carries it. So it's just been a long, arduous struggle, but I'm around for these brothers because they were around for me. So, however they need me, to put my face on whatever's going on, I'm around.
That's a real commitment, considering that you've already paid a heavy price. And I think there's a great deal of value in people sort of seeing you in connection to your story. But I also understand if you would say, you know what, okay, I've done enough here, and let me go live out the rest of my days doing peace and quiet kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that too, but I'm gonna spread myself, the best way that I can. You know what I mean? If there's a way that I can be around for them, I'm gonna do that. You know what I mean? Because they definitely were around for me. You know what I mean?
Thank you. So where do we go from here, gentlemen? Where do we start? What do you want to see happen from this point on? I know you're already out there talking to people. I know that you've had a forum. I was at your forum. I know that you're working in community, or doing your best to work in community. What needs to happen next? Is there a plan that is an overarching plan that you can bring to the community? Is there a meetup where we could come and hear more? What's happening?
All of that. It's happening. I think it has to happen in a way where right now we can't really talk too much on it, because no, seriously, we're strategizing. We're strategizing on a lot to really bring more awareness, and not in some stuff beyond awareness, like a reckoning, and that has to be close to the vest until it's time. So but we're outside around our voting rights stuff on a regular basis. We're canvassing, and we're talking in halfway houses, and we're talking on college campuses about a new theory of how we can actually build equity for our communities. But these issues to me aren't unrelated. They're not unrelated at all, because it's a power vacuum, and we're losing in that. But we're also like, this is a state issue, and how do you go after Goliath? You know, you can't just go after him head up with a sword and with, you know, this heavy armor. You gotta take it off and find 5 smooth stones. So, you know.
Okay, I like the biblical reference. I like it. I like it. That's a good story. So, all right. So you're strategizing. There's a lot of things on the plate because you cannot talk about one thing. I mean, you just can't just talk about Maleek Jones' situation without talking about voters' rights and voter registration and voter disenfranchisement. You can't talk about voter disenfranchisement if you don't talk about educational access, and you can't talk about educational access if you're not talking about housing. And if you're talking about housing, then you better be talking about health equity and health access. You know what I mean? So there's like there is a whole lot on these plates that make up our community, where sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming to tackle some of these things.
Yeah, I think first thing first is we just supporting Maleek in the immediate to make sure that, you know,
Okay.
the state one just submits that they own this and let it go. That he doesn't have to sit with something lingering over his head at this point, you know, when the federal government has gotten involved and has cleared him, has shown that there has been an atrocity that's taken place with his case.
So I would imagine, Maleek, that once you know, we'll know where the state is moving. James and Donald, can we be proactive with pressing the state on this matter? Like, or do we just wait for them to sort of say whatever it is they're going to say or not say?
I would say that you can attempt to press the state.
I think, Maleek, you're gonna have to shut off one of your devices.
Yeah, I just was trying to get this joint to work the best way I could.
You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Doing a good job. We got about 2 minutes left. Go ahead.
Got it. I would say to press the state. I mean, you can still bring the issue to them. So I think that there's going to be opportunities and forums to address those particular concerns. It's really the entry point. So again, they figure who the best way to like strategically think about this is like who's interested and who's not interested, and constituents. So I think in a large position where you think about the state, what are their particular concerns right now? Who would be interested? And so the reality is that if you're not going to get them to move it on a cycle, you still continue to follow the stories, follow the documentaries, put out as much content, and kind of flood the space with this information, because as it becomes part of a large national agenda, it's always that, how does it trickle down? Mm-hmm. So someone has on a national agenda, maybe thinking specifically about Chicago or Louisiana. So they may not see Connecticut as a larger issue. So however it happens, whoever's funding it privately and publicly, you have to recognize that at the federal level, those funds are not equally dispersed. It's equally dispersed among those constituents that have advocated for it or have favors for it. So I think that becomes a hard issue where it's saying like, well, how does that come down to us at the state level? And saying, even though it's a federal conversation and it's on the state platform or the federal platform, how does that reform come down to policies when municipalities operate as like their own sovereign space? So I think it's like James, it's strategic in understanding where are the particular points of pressure to push on versus trying to say, okay, you can make noise about it, but it has to have a landing ground in a nice way.
Okay. Well, I so appreciate the time that y'all took with me this morning to come and talk about Mr. Jones and the strategy and what is going on and raising awareness around wrongfully convicted folks. I will invite you back. I want you to come back. I want you to consider this a platform that y'all can use to get the word out and to raise awareness and to call to action. So feel free to just, hit me up and let me know when you want to come back on, talk some more about this.
Look forward to it.
Thank you too.
Thank you. And it's good to see you, Mr. Maleek Jones. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
James Jeter, I know I'll see you, and nephew Don McCauley, I know I'll see you shortly too. So y'all take good care. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Y'all take care. How do you get it?